Last night, we gathered in our sanctuary to celebrate 21 confirmation students as they led almost the entire service, playing instruments, reading Torah, sharing their thoughts on their budding theologies, and most crucially, opening and closing the ark at the proper times. Thank you. Our cups brimmed with nachas, pride, and joy in their accomplishment of a full year of Jewish learning and confirming their Jewish identities. The night prior, as we rehearsed for the service, we had each student take their place and move through their reading. And as we were practicing to release some of the anxieties and smooth out some of the sharper edges and anything that was unclear, one student greeted the imaginary congregation before her, welcoming them to our Shavuot service. It's a good thing that it was the rehearsal. Of course, she meant Shavuot, and she laughed it off with grace and said it perfectly last night. But Shavuot was actually somewhat of a midrashic mistake. The word lishaber means to break. So the word shivarot loosely translates to broken things, similar to the word shivarim, which you might be familiar with, a call for the shofar, that distinctly is not one long held out note, but rather three broken sounds. This midrashic mistake actually makes a not so subtle comment on the world these confirmation students are walking into as soon to be Jewish adults and the world they walk through as Jewish teenagers every day. A world in which they experience anti-Semitism either at school or online, one in which when they travel overseas this summer, even on Jewish trips, they'll think about whether to hide their stars. On social and mainstream media, we face an unbelievable bias against the state of Israel, and all Americans endure increasingly challenging and polarized politics that break us apart from one another instead of bringing us together. The holiday of Shavuot, while celebrating the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, Chag Matan Torah, also commemorates a moment of brokenness. We all know the story that after being on cloud nine, full of spiritual elevation, moral vigor, and great enthusiasm to share, Moses comes down from the mountain with the first set of 10 commandments, only to be greeted by those who had heard the word of God 1 moment ago, it seemed, and are now worshiping a statue of their own making. Full of disappointment and anger, efforts wasted, and love betrayed, Moses smashes the tablets into 1,000,000 pieces before the people. But long before the tablets were shattered, before disappointment and betrayal even entered the story, there was another moment of fragility, a quieter brokenness in the wilderness, when the Israelites first realized they were in the desert, when they were no longer dancing and singing at the tops of their lungs with Miriam, when their elation at being freed from slavery wore off, when they were wandering in the openness of the wilderness without a sense of security or safety in sight. Fear, anxiety, apprehension, the terrifying realization that liberation and certainty are not the same thing. Freedom itself can feel disorienting when you do not yet know where you are going or who you will become when you arrive in that place. There is a moment in the Torah in which God seeks to comfort them by saying that God will guide them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Lo yamish amud hanan yomam ve'amud ha'esh laila lifnei ha'am. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night will not depart from the people. At first glance, this seems very practical, a divine GPS through the wilderness. But the rabbis, as they often do, ask a deeper question. What did that pillar actually feel like? What did it mean for a traumatized people to be led by cloud and fire? There is a moment in which God comforts them by saying that God will continue to guide them. And the Midrash picks up on this. There's a Midrash that teaches about the very first time that God sent the pillar of cloud. When we imagine this pillar, we often picture it standing tall and majestically in front of Moses, who's standing in front of the people, leading them on their way slowly. But the Midrash says that is not so about this first pillar of cloud. The very first time the pillar appeared, it did not stand before them. It descended upon them. It enveloped the entire people completely. And in that misty haze, these weary people who had known only slavery, instability, degradation, and fear, were shown a vision of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, a place of extraordinary beauty and intentionality. They saw the gold and the silver and the copper, the fine white, purple, blue, and crimson linens inviting them in. They saw the Holy of Holies. This was a place where the divine presence could dwell among them. This was a place where perhaps they could literally dwell. A place of structure amidst the chaos, intimacy amidst uncertainty, holiness amidst instability. The Midrash imagines that before the Mishkan was ever physically built, the Israelites first had to be able to imagine it. Before they could construct sanctuary in the world, they had to hold sanctuary in their minds and understand that it was possible. In the moment the cloud descended, God reached out to our people, understanding that for them to survive in the wilderness, they needed a larger vision. They needed to believe that brokenness was not all there was. We understand that we live in a broken world, and we feel it politically, socially, communally, and personally. And yet our faith insists that despair can never become our theology. As we enter the summer months, we're invited into a different rhythm, one of a slower pace, of reflection, reconnection with family, with nature, and with ourselves. As we move toward the high holidays, which fall earlier this year, making them feel humorously soon for us, perhaps this is also a moment to ask ourselves, what visions are guiding us today? What are we building toward? What kind of people, families, communities, and world are we trying to create? I want to add one more layer to the Midrash. There's a Kabbalistic teaching that when the Israelites stood within that first pillar of cloud, they saw that they were not standing in their own singular pillar, blocked off from one another, but that they were standing in one collective cloud. They were one people, one community, one kehilah. They realized that a true community is not simply a collection of individual people doing their own thing, but people who come together to achieve a collective purpose, building something larger than themselves. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory teaches that a true community is not merely individuals occupying the same space, but people bound together by a shared responsibility, shared vision, and sacred purpose. People willing to build something larger than themselves. Our confirmation students discovered a piece of that this year as well. Yes, they learned prayers and theology and Jewish texts, and they learned that Judaism is lived in community. I cannot count on two hands the number of students who wrote in their reflections about feeling more deeply connected to community this year. Because when we gather here at WRT, we're not only gathering to pray. We gather to create refuge for one another. We gather to remind one another that no one walks through the wilderness alone. We gather to hold each other through moments of grief and celebration, doubt and discovery, fear and hope. Because covenant was not formed in isolation, but in relationship. It is a complicated world out there. So perhaps Shavuot was not such a mistake after all, because Shavuot is not only about receiving Torah at the height of spiritual clarity, it's also about what we do in moments of fragmentation. It is about whether we can stand amidst the brokenness of the world and still choose to be in this covenant, still choose to be in community with one another, still choose to believe that something whole and holy can yet be built together. Shabbat Shalom.